Welcome to the Heartbeat for Hire podcast. I'm your host, Lyndsay Dowd. My goal is to help train leaders and sales organizations how to manage and deliver results with empathy, compassion, and kindness. Let's get started. Greetings and welcome to this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. You know I always bring you stories of resilience, and today is no exception. Running legend Dave McGillivray has increased the self-esteem of millions of people through his work as an entrepreneur, philanthropist, motivational speaker, author, and athlete. Dave is best known for his athletic feats, including his 80-day trek across the United States, running 3,452 miles from Medford, Oregon to Medford, Mass. In the summer of 1978 to benefit the Jimmy Fund. In addition, he has received great acclaim for directing or consulting on more than 1,400 events throughout the world, including the Boston Marathon, the Olympic marathon trials, and the Olympic Games. And he's my neighbor. Welcome, Dave. So happy you're here.
Thank you so much. You just gave my speech, so anybody have any questions? No, all good. Great to be with you, Lyndsay. Thank you.
God, it's my pleasure. I'm so happy you're here. So would you do the kindness, and I've listened to your TED Talk. Those that haven't, would you give a little background of your story?
Sure. I grew up a long time ago. Well, I didn't actually physically grow up, but I was born and raised in Medford, Mass, and obviously right outside of Boston. And as a result of being, exposed to so much sports excitement, Red Sox, Patriots, Bruins, Celtics, my one sort of goal as a young boy in life was to be a professional athlete. And I played second base in Little League. And so I always wanted to play second base for the Boston Red Sox. But unfortunately for me, given my short stature, I was always the last one cut when I went out for team sports, or always the last pick when my friends would pick sides in the park leagues. And I learned about the concept of, at the young age of 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, of rejection. And it was really difficult. No, I wasn't physically ill, but emotionally, I was, devastated that didn't seem like anybody wanted me or would pick me. But that's when I decided to run, because nobody can cut you from running. And since then, I've run 165,000 miles. I've run 167 marathons. I've done all these different endurance feats over the years. But for me, when I first did my run across the United States, I knew in my heart, personally, I wanted to do it, but I felt like I needed a greater purpose in order to get through 120-degree temperature in the desert, or 14,000 feet over the Rocky Mountains, and 45, 50 miles every single day for 80 days with a day off. You need something. You need a magnet. You need a target. And that's when I combined, personal goal setting with philanthropy. And I did it for the benefit of the Jimmy Fund, which is the fundraising arm of the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. So the Red Sox and the Jimmy Fund supported me. And Runner's World magazine actually said that was the first time someone had combined their running with raising money for cancer research. So I say, look back on my life, 43 years of doing this. The thing I'm most proud of, and the legacy I would like to leave, is not how many miles I've run or marathons I've competed in, but more so the give back, the philanthropy, the helping those in need, the fundraising. That's sort of what this is all about for me.
Oh, well, you stole one of my later questions, but I'll forgive you for that. We'll come back to it later. But I want you to retell the story of, I think it was your grandfather who challenged you to run your first Boston Marathon. And yeah. I think this is such a great story for so many reasons, but we talk a lot about resilience here, and you had to learn some tough lessons in those first attempts.
Yeah. Well, I like I said, I started running when I was around 12 years old. And when I was around 15, I was listening to the Boston Marathon on the radio, and the gentleman from England won, Ron Hill, pouring rain. This is 1970. I was like amazed that somebody could do that. And then a couple of years later, I just said, I'm going to do this myself. I was 17 years old, a senior in high school. And I just decided that day I was going to run the Boston Marathon. So I called up my grandfather, who was a supporter of my athleticism, and he lived right near the marathon course. I said, Grandpa, I'm going to go run that race in Boston. He goes, oh, they call that the Boston Marathon. I said, oh, well, that's a good name for it. Well, I'm going to go run it. He said, okay, I'll meet you at Coolidge Corner. And I said, great. Where's that? He said, 24 miles. I said, deal. My brother drives me out to the start. There was only 1,300 runners in the race that year compared to the 30,000 that are in the race now. And I was running and running and running and running. And finally, I got to the hills in Newton, and bam, down I go, flat out in the hills in Newton. I got taken to the Newton Wellesley Hospital in an ambulance. I called my parents. I said, can you come pick me up? They said, where are you? I said, I'm in the Newton Wellesley Hospital. They're like, what are you doing there? I said, never mind. Just come pick me up. They picked me up, drove me home. I called my grandfather, no answer. Called him again, no answer. Finally, 9 o'clock at night, he answered the phone. I said, Grandpa, where have you been? Dave, where have you been? I've been waiting for you all night. The old man goes by, the street sweepers go by. No, Dave. I said, yeah, I know I quit. He goes, what? I said, I failed. He said, no, you didn't. I said, I didn't. What'd I do? He said, you learned. I said, great. What'd I learn? He said, you learned you cannot go along in life and set reckless goals. You had no business being in that race, and you know it. You didn't train. You didn't earn the right to do it. I said, you're right. He said, I'll cut another deal with you. I said, what's that? He said, now you train for it for next year. I'll be here waiting for you. I said, deal. 2 months later, my grandfather died. And I said, I got to do this for Grandpa for the lesson he taught me. I trained. I was doing 120, 130 miles a week. I was 18 years old. I kind of didn't really know what I was doing, but I was working hard, and I earned the right to toe the line in April of 1973. But the day before the race, I got really sick, and my parents said, you can't run. I said, I have to run. The newspapers are saying, Dave running in memory of Grandfather. They said, you're too sick. I said, well, can you give me something that very few other people have ever given me before? What's that? A chance. A chance. Isn't that all we ever want in life, is a chance to accomplish something? They said, okay. They drove me to the start. I take off. I'm at about 5 miles. They were right. I shouldn't be out here. I was so sick, scraping the bottom of the barrel. I keep going. I finally get to the halfway point, and there's my parents standing aside of the road, and there's my mother. And what's she doing? She's crying. Why? Because that's what mothers do. They cry. Why? Because they're worried about you. They're going through more pain than you'll ever go through. And as a parent now of 5 children, I get it now. What I put my parents through, is unspeakable. But I saw my father, and he's standing on the side of the road. What's he doing? He's taking pictures of my mother crying, And I said, okay, keep going. I got to the point where I dropped out the year before, and I'm doing the survivor shuffle over the hills. And I got to 21.5. Bam, down I go again. 2 years in a row. Now, I want to be an athlete. I want to be a professional athlete. I want to play second base for the Boston Red Sox. I'm the last one cut, the last one picked, drop out of my first Boston Marathon, drop out of my second Boston Marathon. I'm sitting on the curb, head in my hands, thinking this wasn't meant to be. I guess I'm just not meant to be an athlete. And all of a sudden, a defining moment in my life came. And all of a sudden, I looked around. I said, this place looks a little familiar. And I turned around, and I'm sitting in front of the Evergreen Cemetery. And that's where they buried my grandfather. And there's this tombstone right behind me. And I said to myself, son of a gun, he said he'd be here. There he is. Now, maybe he's not there physically, but he's there spiritually. He kept his end of the deal. Get up. I get up, and I finished in 4.5 hours. And on that day, April 1973, I said to myself, I'm going to run this race every year for the rest of my life, earn the right to do it, in honor and tribute to my grandfather who taught me that lesson. And this past a few weeks ago, I ran my 51st consecutive Boston Marathon.
Oh, congratulations. I'm a big Boston Marathon fan, and you made a pivot in your life, not just from running it to actually organizing it. So how did that come about?
Well, I had run across the United States in 1978. And when I finished that run, I was working for a benefit consulting firm at the time. And my boss says, oh, you're going to come back to work tomorrow. I said, tomorrow? I just ran across the continent. Can I have a couple of days? And like 3 days later, I got a termination notice. So he fired me. And I thought, I just ran across the country to raise money for sick kids, and I got fired. Well, guess what? best thing that ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I said to myself, what do I really want to do in life? And I opened up an athletic footwear and clothing store right afterwards. And then I started putting on events to promote the store. And I realized I like putting on events more than shoes on people's feet. So I get into the event management business. And people said, you really think you can earn a living by putting on events, road races? I said, that's not what I'm doing. They said, what are you doing? I said, well, what I'm doing is I'm helping to raise the level of self-confidence and self-esteem of tens of thousands of people in this country. They're like, huh? And I said, you'll find out. And then boom, it took off. Philanthropy entered the space. A lot of women started running in marathons and races, and boom, it just all took off. And then in 1987, there was an incident at the start of the Boston Marathon, and the BAA decided we need to reach out and see if we can find somebody to help us manage this. So they called me, hired me, and 1988 was my first year as technical director of the Boston Marathon. I helped fix things at the start, and my job continued to expand. But the problem was when I got off of the job, I was like, what do I do? Do I run in it, or do I help run it? Like, I made a commitment to my grandfather and myself, I was going to run it every single year. And I said, well, how can I pass up this job? I can't pass it up. So I took the job. But then I was standing at the finish line of that year's marathon, 1988, and everyone's crossing the finish line. And, I'm glad for them, high-fiving them. Everything is great. But, I was full of a little self-pity. Why? Because I hadn't run it. So I tapped the state police trooper on the shoulder, and I said, officer, will you do me a favor? He goes, what? I said, will you drive me back to the start? He goes, why? Did you forget something? I said, yeah, forgot to run. So he drove me back to the start, 8 o'clock at night, and I took off by myself, finished dead last, obviously, because I started so late, a little after 11 o'clock at night. And that's the way I've run my Boston Marathon for the last 36 years.
Oh, I love that. I love that you had the tenacity and the grit to keep going and to keep figuring out this was a promise you kept to yourself. We can't talk about the Boston Marathon without talking about the horror show that was the marathon bombing. And that had to be incredibly frightening. And what a logistical nightmare to try and work through. I mean, talk about resilience. And, the marathon is running again. And it's a hugely emotional, important event to Bostonians and people all around the world. So can you share some of that story?
Sure. So in 2012, it was a really hot year. So a lot of athletes, runners were transported to 250 were transported to hospitals. We treated 2,200 in the medical tent. It was a hard year, 2012. And I said to myself, all right, we need a good year. We need good weather, a good year. We deserve this. 2013 came. We woke up. Beautiful day. It was awesome. I said, finally, we got a good one. We got a good one. I went out to the start, and I was managing the start. And then we had a 26-second moment of silence for the victims of the Sandy Hook tragedy. So you can hear a pin drop in Hopkins. We had like 20,000 runners. You couldn't hear a thing. Everyone was emotional. 26 seconds. That's an interesting number.
Right.
20 seconds, moment of silence. Little did I know, standing there during that moment of silence, that 26 miles away, we were going to be experiencing our own tragedy only a few hours later. We didn't know that then. I get on my lead motorcycle and off we go, and everyone's running, and it's great. I get to the finish. I get off the motorcycle. I go to the bleachers where my family is. I give my daughter Ellie and son Luke a hug, and my wife, and everything's great. I walked around the finish area. I checked in with everyone, went into the medical tent. Not a lot of business going on because the weather was so good. Not a lot of people were hurt. So I said, all right, well, I checked in with everyone. Time to go back out to the start and do my run. So I get to the start, and all of a sudden my phone rings. And someone said, there's been 2 explosions at the finish line. You got to get back here. So the state police drove me back going 100 miles an hour down the Mass Turnpike. Back in like 20 minutes. I get to the area near the finish line, and everything had been evacuated. It was an eerie sense because it was really quiet, but all you could hear was sirens, ambulances. That's it. Because everyone had been evacuated. There weren't any people around, or not many. They let me into the security area. I went into the medical tent. I had been in the medical tent only a few hours earlier. There was nothing going on. I went in this time, and there was a lot of business going on, but they weren't runners. So I said, well, I can't really do much here. I want to go find my family, my own family. I didn't know. I called my wife 20 times, but the cell service had got knocked out.
Right.
So I didn't know where the family was. I didn't know if they were impacted. I didn't know where these devices went off. So I went up to go to the finish line, and a police officer stopped me. He goes, hey, where you going? I said, I'm going up to the finish line to find my family. He said, no, you're not. I said, well, I'm the race director. Here's my ID. He says, it's not your race anymore. And that really hit how serious this all was. And so there was nothing I could do to find my family. I just assumed that they had been evacuated and they're okay. So then I said, well, 6,500 runners were stopped. I got to go back to work. So I went back to work in a sense of trying to deal with how do you deal with 6,500 runners who don't know where to go, what to do, get their gear bag, none of that. So I was back out on the street for about the next 7 or 8 hours until, around 1 a.m. until everyone finally left the area. And I came home 2 days later after all of this. And I saw my son, who was in the bleachers and saw everything. And he came up to me and gave me a hug. And he said, Dad, I never want you to direct that race again. Oof. And for me, it was a tough moment, because here's my own son, thinking that my work is dangerous. And family, fun, friendly, that's what it's always been. Right. That's what it's always been. And all of a sudden, one incident, and now it's all changed. And it still has changed, right? So, but we process and we persevere and we recover. And like 3 months later, after just working through it, he come up to me and he said, Dad, remember I told you I never want you to direct that race again? I said, yeah, Luke, I remember. He goes, you know why? I said, why? He says, because I want to direct it now. And ever since, he never came back to the finish line for 3 or 4 years, but now he's a great runner. He's a junior in high school. He's one of the best milers and 2-milers in the state. He loves running. He just won a race last night, on the track. So the point being is we're resilient. Yeah. We persevere. And it was amazing, the outpouring of support. The day after that marathon, I had a couple of athletes come up to me and said, Dave, I don't know if I could ever come back here, thinking that this was going to happen all the time. Right. And after that, the world started banging on our door. The world. And we're like, what do we do? Like, how do we handle all this in terms of the demand to participate? We will not be denied our running freedom. And so we increased in 2014 the field size, another 9,000 people. 2014 was the most epic Boston Marathon of all time, just given the fact that the world came, they supported the event, it was flawless, it was safe, and that's the way it's been for the last 10 years.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. It's emotional just to remember. And, I watched the whole thing on TV, and I had so many friends that were down right by the explosion. So I have so many stories that I can recall, and I just can't imagine the fear of your son and your family who had to see that and not be able to find you. That's really, really frightening stuff. So what were some of the leadership lessons that came out of that and came out of subsequent years? Because any leader that's had to face a serious trauma like that has to find some amount of grit and some inspiration to get people to want to do this again. So yes. What'd you do?
Well, I think in terms of leadership, for me anyways, a lot of it is about a number of things. One is preparation, being prepared. Do your what ifs, do your plan A, B, C, D, E, do your hypothetical tabletop sessions. Don't assume, that everything's going to be perfect. Plan for the worst, hope for the best. All those things really do matter. And you don't get credit for that. When you do all those things behind the curtain, no one knows you're planning B, C, and D. They just know A, kind of a thing. My motto has always been, I do not want to put out fires. I want to prevent them. Yeah. I want to prevent them. You put out a fire, you're probably going to look a little bit like a hero. But the fact of the matter is, you might be the villain who caused it because you didn't prepare well enough. For me, I want to prepare. Then the next thing is delegation, right? Because the leader can't do it all.
That's right.
So I look at myself more not as a director, but as a conductor, and I have an orchestra, and they're the best at all those specific disciplines. And my job is to motivate, inspire, communicate, bring it all together in one harmonious way, and to acknowledge and compliment their efforts, to let them know how much they're appreciated. So that's another thing. And then the last thing, which is an interesting one for me anyways, is what I consider confidence, right? So we didn't really plan for explosions at the finish line. That those
part
of our tabletop exercises, right? But we did plan for things like, the photo bridge going down, or, a building fire where we'd have to shut everything down. And so, I mean, people had a sense, for what would need to be done if there was a catastrophe of some sort. But it also comes down to, experience. That's why my greatest talent is surrounding myself with people who are smarter than me.
I say that all the time, Dave. I love that you said that.
People who are more experienced, and you can't. When I first started my business, I kept everything so close to the vest. This is mine. We're going to do it my way, and that's it. And then as things grew and get expanded, I'm like, I can't handle all this. So then it's a matter of having the faith, and trust, but verify, right? So
what you described was giving people the space to do the job they were hired for.
Absolutely.
And you're giving them the confidence and the support for them to lead where they need to lead and be decisive. And that's what the best leaders do. So I love that you shared that the way you did. It was just perfect. It's great. And that's really, truly what good leaders do. And this part of the reason I do this podcast is there's so many metaphors for sports and business and so many examples of great leadership through sport. And you just described exactly why I do this. Beautiful. So you wrote a book. So what is your book about?
Well, I've written 4 books. The first one was a book, an adult book called The Last Pick, for obvious reasons, being the last pick. But what's the last pick about? When people say, what's your book about? I always say it's about the person reading it. Like, the person reading it is in the book. And they're like, what do you mean? Well, I don't name them, but they can identify with everything I'm saying. We all have challenges, hurdles to overcome. No one's immune to this. A lot of times you go, well, why me and all that stuff? But everybody has something going on that's a challenge, and you got to sort of figure it out and process it. And that's why I give a lot of motivational talks. I've done like 1,400 of them, 1,500 motivational talks, and it's called Defining Moments. And in our lives, we all have defining moments. Some are good, some not so good.
Right.
And it's how you process them and how you deal with them that defines you as a person, right? So my book, The Last Pick, is about overcoming the hurdles, overcoming the challenges, overcoming rejection, all that kind of stuff. Then I wrote 3 children's books. The first one was Dream Big. And because when I was little, but I had dreams, right? And I would never be intimidated by my dreams, my objectives, my goals, my aspirations, and I've always felt that those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. And so I would never let anyone say, oh, you can't, you'll never be able to, I'll earn the right to do it and then I'll go do it. So every single athletic thing I ever said I was going to do, I challenged myself to do, I've done. I've been able to do it. And that's only because of the lesson my grandfather taught me. So dream big. Then the next book I wrote was Running Across America, for obvious reasons. The last one was Finish Strong. And Finish Strong is about my participation in the World Marathon Challenge, which is running 7 marathons in 7 days. on 7 continents. So we got on a plane and went to Antarctica, ran a marathon there, got back on the plane, went to Cape Town, South Africa, ran a marathon there, got back on the plane, flew 12 hours to Perth, Australia, ran a marathon there, and then went to Dubai in Asia, and went to Lisbon in Portugal, and then went to Cartagena in South America, and finished up in Miami. 7 marathons, 7 days, 7 continents. But it's not just about running. It's a teaching moment, these children's books, because, with 777, it's all about, the continents and geography and all that kind of stuff. In the back of the book, all 3 books, I never wanted to write children's books and have them just read it and just kind of put it down and go play a game of ping pong. It's like, what's the call to action here? If you're going to write a book, there's got to be a call to action. And the call to action in the back of the children's books is what I call the Dream Big Marathon Challenge. And I challenge kids to run 26 miles over 26 days or 26 weeks, to read 26 books, and to do 26 acts of kindness. Why? Because I think the 3 pillars of life are health and fitness, taking care of yourself, education and literacy, taking care of your mind, and lastly, philanthropy, giving back. Acts of kindness. So that's what I'm teaching kids to try to do. And I have thousands and thousands of kids across America doing the Dream Big Marathon Challenge right now.
Oh, I love that. Well, I'm happy to tell you, I ran exactly 1 marathon in my life. I raised tons of money for, it was Team in Training at the time. It was leukemia research. And I will never do another one. It was around Diamond Head in Honolulu.
Oh, nice.
Terrible course, and it was way too hot and it uphill. It was bad, but I did it and I finished, and it's something I could check off my list.
Good for you.
So you've given us so many stories of resilience, but I know you have one more, and that's you've had a health scare that you had to weather through all of this. I mean, running is your favorite thing to do, arguably. So how did that impact you, and how are you doing today?
Yeah. So back in 2013, that was a tough year.
Not a good year.
Not a good year. I was diagnosed with severe coronary artery disease. I was out running and I could feel some difficulty in my chest and difficulty breathing. And I went into Mass General and got all these tests done, echocardiogram, pulmonary tests, stress tests, EKGs, everything. And the results were all the same. There's nothing wrong with you. I said, yes, there is. I can't breathe when I'm running. There's something wrong with me. You got to look under the hood, guys. Give me the big boy tests, right? So they did a CAT scan, an angiogram, and doctor walks in and he goes, there, and there. And I said, there, what? He goes, there, you have severe coronary artery disease. I said, no, really, what do I got? He goes, no, you have coronary artery disease. I said, how can I have coronary? I ran across the country twice. I've run up the East Coast of America. I've done 9 Ironman triathlons. I've done all these different things. Well, you do. Okay. All right. And that's when I learned that just because you're fit doesn't mean you're healthy. And I always thought it did. So I turned to the doctor and I said, zip it up. He goes, what? I said, don't tell anyone. He goes, why? I said, because it's a ding on my armor. I don't want anyone to know that I'm ill. They're going to think all this running caused this. And that's not the case. I know it's not the case. So all of a sudden it leaked out and people heard that this guy has coronary artery disease. And I started getting all these emails from runners all over the country saying, I heard about you and I had the same symptoms. And when I got checked and I walked out of the hospital with 3 stents and you saved my life. I saved your life. My goodness. And I said, you little son of a gun, you so full of self-pity, that you don't want anyone to know, I said, you got to create awareness. You got to let people know that we're not invincible. You might think you are, but you're not, no matter what. So, I changed everything. I turned to the doctor and I said, let me ask you a question. He goes, what? I said, is this reversible? He says, well, it depends. I said, depends on what? He said, depends on the person. I said, well, I'm over here.
Yeah. What can I do?
You, with your discipline, I think you can have an impact in your own illness. I said, well, sign me up. I changed everything. My diet, nutrition, sleep habits. I always thought sleep was overrated because I wanted to get the most out of every single day. Stress from the bombing, from everything else, blah, blah, blah. In 6 months, I lowered my cholesterol level by over 100 points, lost 27 pounds. And I said, I'm going back to Hawaii, do the Ironman again in Hawaii for the first time in 25 years. So I called the Ironman. I said, can I come do it? And they said, yeah, but you got to get a note from your doctor. I said, what? So I've never got a note from my doctor. He goes, well, you do now. We heard about you. And I said, all right. Went to my doctor. I said, can I have a note? He goes, no. I said, why? Because I don't want you going down in the lava fields either. I said, well, what's it going to take? He says, we got to do another angiogram and see how you've improved. We did another angiogram and he goes, oh my goodness. I said, what? He said, you reversed your own coronary artery disease by over 40%. I said, can I have the note? He goes, yep. And I went back to Hawaii, did the Ironman. So the next 2 or 3 years, I was fit, I was healthy, and then 2018 came, it came back. And that's when I realized you can't run away from your genetics because most of this was all in my DNA. So I went to the hospital again. They did another angiogram. The doctor says you have 95% blockage in your main artery. I said, I thought I beat this. I said, what are my options? He said, well, we can do nothing, but you have to live a sedentary life. I said, cross that out.
Can't do that.
We can stent it, but it's really risky near the heart. But I said, no, I'm not going to mess with the heart. Or we can do open heart surgery. And I said, nah, I don't like that either. I don't want you to cut me. No. He said, well, you run out of options. So, well, let me ask you this one question. In 6 months, there's this little race in Boston in April. I've shuffled through it a couple of times, like 47. What do you think? He gave me the best possible answer. He didn't say, no, I don't think you can do it, or yes, I think you can. He said, I'd be extremely disappointed if you can't do it. I said, ooh, gave me that 4-letter word, hope. He said, really? I said, okay, let's do it. I had open heart triple bypass surgery. Then I had the delicate balance of recovery, training. How much is too much? How much is too little? It was brutal for the next 6 months. I trained, I recovered, I went and I did it. And I crossed the finish line. And for me, it was the most emotional marathon. I'd run 167 of them, 51 Bostons. But it was the most emotional marathon because I wasn't really sure I'll be able to keep doing it, but I persevered, I recovered, and I was able to cover the distance.
And let me tell you guys, I see Dave running every single day. So he is
missed a day in 2 years and 3 months.
It's incredible. So you have been so inspiring through this whole conversation and through all the work that you do. What inspires you?
You know, what inspires me, listen, no one's better than anyone else. We are all human interest stories. And when I hear about other people accomplishing, that inspires me. You know, my children doing really well in school inspires me. Seeing my son doing really well in a track meet inspires me. Seeing my wife do what she does and volunteering and helping those in need inspires me. My other children, everything that they do, it's like a cyclical thing. You know, we inspire each other. And again, for me, I've always said, you know, when people say, what's the toughest part about running a marathon? The toughest part? Signing the application. Is having the courage and the guts to make the commitment. And then you got to earn the right. Then you toe the line. You answer the gun. You run the course. You cross the finish line. You get a medal. Magic happens. You go home feeling good about yourself. And there's nothing more powerful in the world than to feel good about yourself, because that's the foundation by which we accomplish everything in our lives. And that's why I continue to do this. People say, why do you keep doing this all the time? I said, I want to be relevant. I want to be relevant. I want to take the rearview mirror out of my car, throw it away. Because what I've done in the past is over. Yeah, it's a foundation of confidence, but it's over. Like, what do you got for me today? And so that's why I continue to set goals and not limits.
Well, one of the questions I always ask, which you already answered, is what would you like your legacy to be? And you said it more than once. So thank you for giving everyone such inspiration, so much hope, such very applicable direction. It's so much fun to listen to you. So how can people find you, Dave?
I'm out on the road running. You'll find me.
I know how to find you.
No, I mean, my company is DMSE Sports. So you just go up on that website and my email is there, www.dmsesports.com. So
and we'll post it so people can.
And the only thing I'll leave everyone with is, I always tell my audiences, the most important person in the world is you. It has to be you. And you have to take care of yourself, because if you take care of yourself, you don't burden other people that have to do it for you because you neglected you, and you put yourself in a position where you can help other people. So take care of yourself.
Good parting words, my friend. Thank you so much for being such a fabulous guest. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Heartbeat for Hire. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for listening to Heartbeat for Hire. If you like what you hear, I'd love it if you'd subscribe and leave a 5-star review. To keep the conversation going, you can find me on Insta or at LinkedIn at Lyndsay Dowd, H4H, or you can reach me at my website, heartbeatforhire.com. Thanks so much. Have a great day.